Welcome to another episode of Meal Prep Monday. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. Today we are revisiting a very important topic, and that is salt. Before we dive into today's content, a quick reminder that if you have not tried out our time-saving meal plans, you can head to prepdish.com/mpm and give us a try for 2 weeks for free. What you get each week is a plan that will give you a done-for-you grocery list. All you have to do is go out, buy the groceries. We will give you step-by-step instructions for getting healthy, tasty meals on the table each night. I challenge you to give it a try this week, see if your family likes it, and also listen into this episode on the importance of salting your food, whether or not you are using the meal plans. Although I will say this specific episode is definitely, it came to fruition with the thought of like, this would be really helpful for anyone that is using our Prep Dish meal plans. But even if you are not, if you're doing any cooking at home for yourself, this is a really important episode. And I'm going to talk about salt mainly from a culinary perspective, but I know before I get into that, I do want to touch on some of the nutritional kind of aspects of salt and sodium and how they're intertwined. And it was funny when I was kind of writing the notes out for this, I had this thought back to, my bachelor's degree is actually in culinary nutrition. And when I set out, I'm going to get to a point on this that'll tie it into salt, but when I set out to do this degree, to me, it just naturally felt as if the, study of culinary arts and nutrition really should be integrated. And so often they're not, right? You think of a chef going to culinary school, not knowing anything about nutrition, and vice versa. You think of, a dietitian in a hospital, maybe wearing a lab coat and thinking about numbers, but not really, caring or even knowing so much about the culinary arts. And I know that has kind of evolved and changed, but I still strongly believe that these two should be integrated much more than they even are today. And one of those places where I see like, they just have to be, you can't talk about one without the other, is when it comes to salt and sodium in your food. I think you really have to look at it from both a nutrition perspective as well as, the culinary perspective. So first, I want to touch on that kind of nutrition side of things, because I know sometimes if I just start out saying, oh, well, salt makes food taste better, so add more salt. Some of you are going to be thinking in your head, well, I've been told salt is not great for you. It's bad for your health. It's going to cause high blood pressure. Both myself and Mary. So Mary's our meal plan editor, and she was the one that came to me. I think we've done an episode on salting your food, but it's been a few years. And she's like, I think it's time to do another episode on salting your food. It's something she thinks about a lot, and we talk about a lot in terms of how to kind of best instruct any of you that are using our meal plans, how to make sure that you're appropriately salting your food, mainly from like a taste perspective. So if I want someone to eat healthy, like I am going to lead with flavor, right? Like if you're going to eat healthy, I want you to lead with flavor and things that taste good, because if it doesn't taste good, it's not going to be sustainable, and it's just really not going to work long term. So when I look at eating more healthfully and increasing your nutrition, I really lead from a flavor perspective, and how can we find these healthy but delicious foods, and delicious being like kind of where you start. Now, one of the reasons in the past, like sodium has been such a concern, is when with all of the processed foods out there, they are so high in sodium that it did get to a point where there's like, if you're eating all processed foods, it may be true that you are consuming too much sodium. Now, if you start switching to a healthier diet and cooking more of your foods from home, using more from scratch ingredients and less processed foods, you're going to be significantly cutting out your sodium. And that doesn't mean, oh, this is amazing, I'm cutting out all my sodium. Like the goal is not zero sodium. You need sodium for balances in your body. And if this is something you're concerned about, I would recommend, going to a dietitian or a doctor that's going to maybe do some blood work and look into some of this, and they can advise kind of your specific situation. Like none of this is, specific medical advice, but just know if you're making everything from scratch and cutting out processed foods, you still need to have some sodium in your diet. It's actually really bad for your health to not have enough sodium. If you're exercising, if you live in a hot climate, if you're breastfeeding, any of these things are going to increase your sodium needs. The other thing that I like to remind people is that one of the things that balances out the sodium in our body is potassium, and vegetables are really high in potassium. So as you increase your veggie intake, it's okay to add salt to your vegetables for a few reasons. Again, the nutrition one here is that it helps to, the potassium in the vegetables is naturally kind of making that more balanced and healthy in your body. And then, of course, again, like I said, from the culinary perspective, and then making the vegetables a part of your diet, if they taste better, if they have some salt in them, it's going to be more sustainable. You're going to look forward to eating them. So that's always been a big goal here at Prep Dish, is like, how do we make these healthy foods taste good so people want to eat them? They feel good about eating them. They crave them. Like, that's what I want, is you craving healthy foods. And I think sodium and salt, like adding table salt, is a part of that. So why now? Why do we need to be adding salt? Again, cooking more things from scratch and just kind of keeping that in mind. Now, I'm going to wrap up the episode with talking about some things to think about when you're adding salt to your diet. I do want to mention before that, some foods to look out for with high sodium content. So sometimes I'll look at things like, if I have a meal that has some items that already have a lot of sodium in them, then maybe I will be a little less liberal in my salting. So anything canned, unless it says, no salt added, but like canned beans or vegetables or anything like that, those will be, high in sodium. But if you're making your beans from scratch, definitely salt them. Even last night, my husband made some black beans in the Instant Pot, and he remembered, like, as we're eating dinner, he's like, oh my gosh, I forgot to salt them. Well, of course, they don't taste as good because they needed to have some salt. So if you're making them from scratch, they definitely need that. Same thing with broth. So if you buy the store-bought broth, it's usually going to be really high in sodium. So the flip side of that, if you're making broth at home, definitely add some salt. It's going to add a lot of good flavor. And again, it's going to really actually kind of balance out that nutritional profile. Soy sauce, even reduced sodium soy sauce, those are all really high in sodium. So I would almost consider that like a way of adding salt to my meals. If I'm adding some sort of soy sauce based sauce, then I would kind of consider that the salt that I'm adding to the meal. And then processed meats also, have quite a bit of sodium as well. So, if those are being added to a dish, kind of keep in mind that those are, in a way, sort of a source of sodium. Okay, so some things to think about when you are salting your food. I have 3 things here. The first one, and this one comes straight from Mary, our meal plan editor, and she does try and make sure in the Prep Dish plans to always mention this, but the importance of salting meat before you cook it. And I wanted to give you more information on that. And so I was just going to talk about it, but then when I was kind of like looking around, I found on a beef association site, and I just wanted to read this directly because I really liked the wording it used to explain why it's important to salt meats before you cook them. So this says that adding salt to the exterior of a piece of steak draws out the moisture in the steak. The salt then dissolves in this moisture, creating a brine that is then reabsorbed back into the steak. In this process, the lean muscle proteins in the meat are broken down, made juicier and more tender. So I feel like for some reason that description, I can really visualize a lot more than some of the other descriptions that I've read in the past on how important it is to like give the meat time to absorb that salt and like give it the flavor and the texture that you're looking for. And I know that's steak specifically, but it's important for other meats as well, especially if you're doing, sometimes we'll do a brine on a turkey or a whole chicken or something. And that's one of the things that's going on there. Okay, number 2 tip when it comes to salting foods. So if you're salting like a pan of like roasted vegetables, look at the distance that you're holding your hand from that food and hold it up really high. You're going to get a much more even distribution. I still go ahead and toss everything, but when I'm salting my food, it does help. You've probably noticed this. Like sometimes it seems like maybe the chef is just being like extra dramatic for TV or something, like holding the hand way up high and putting the salt on the food. But it actually does, if you think about it, when it's really close, it's just going to like come down in clumps on like one piece. But if you hold it up high and kind of sprinkle it around, you are going to get a better distribution. I'm actually thinking I might try and do a reel on this on Instagram because I think it would really help to visualize and see the difference. So that's number 2. And then number 3, I know I've said it before, but I'm going to continue to say it, is taste as you go. It's so important when you're cooking to taste as you're making your food, before, after, kind of all the different stages where it's possible. But that's really going to be the best way. And, you're usually cooking this food for you and your family, so your taste best. And if you're using the Prep Dish meal plans or even, other recipes, you want to make sure they're to your liking. So if the Prep Dish plan says add, this much, fresh chopped cilantro, and oh my gosh, we love cilantro, add more. Or if you don't love cilantro, don't add it at all. And the same things comes for things like salt, like kind of salt it to your best taste. And we don't actually give usually specific amounts on the salt. One, sometimes it's hard because it may not even be enough salt. Like it may be less than 1/8 of a teaspoon, but sometimes it's more. And there's just so many factors that go into it. So we really want you to kind of hone that skill of being able to like fine tune your tastes and what's going to, again, be really tasty and delicious for you, so that this way of eating is sustainable and a long-term thing that you stick with. So those are my 3 tips there. I have like a last little note that I want to end on, and it's just a fun little thing to say. I love the salty chocolate trend that's been going on kind of for a few years now, but I've noticed, one of my favorite Hu chocolate bars is the salty chocolate. And I just feel like everywhere you can go, you can get like these salty, desserts. And this is like at the end. So I will do a quick note on this. So the meat, I talked about salting it at the beginning. Now, sometimes salting things, there's a reason to salt things at the end. And that's because you can actually like taste them on the bite, right? Like think you could put, half a teaspoon of salt in your brownies. It's going to help bring out the flavor, but you're not going to notice it's there. You can add the smallest sprinkling on top, and because it's there on top, your mouth is like instantly going to taste it. So there is something to be said to like adding that like final finished sprinkle of salt to kind of really give you more of the flavor. And I have heard that as sort of a tip to reduce the amount of total salt that you use, is that by adding that like final sprinkling, you kind of trick your mouth into thinking there's a lot of salt in it, when in reality, it's just like, oh, there's a lot of salt immediately that you taste. So, there's kind of a few different ways of looking at it and ways of incorporating it as you're, cooking and making your foods. And, again, like before I wrap up, if you have not tried our meal plans, it's something you're interested in, we have a 2-week free trial just so you can try it out, see if it's a fit for you. prepdish.com/MPM. Again, like one of our whole things here is we want to make sure that, healthy food is tasting delicious. It's something that becomes a regular part of your family. We want to make healthy food be your routine. We want it to be part of your lifestyle. And we think in order to do that, making it easy and more simplified and of course, delicious and tasty is going to help. So go to prepdish.com/MPM if you have not tried those out and you want to give them a try. If you are a regular listener to this podcast and you have not left a rating and review, I would just ask you to do that as a favor. That really helps us to, reach more people and for people to find our podcast. If you've already done that, maybe just do a quick screenshot, send this episode to someone that you think would enjoy it. And that's all I have for this week. I will be back again next Monday with another episode.